everyone knows, but I am J.R. Cummings. I'm the president of the regional club here in DC. I'll introduce Haley as well. Haley is our vice president. And I'll introduce Patrick. Patrick is our liaison to the college. What is your official title, Patrick? I'm not sure. Alumni Relations Coordinator?
Assistant Director of Alumni Relations.
That's much more prestigious than I.
What a fun job.
It's a great job.
Are you on campus this week?
I am. I'm on campus on Mondays and Fridays for the time being.
And where are you? You're of course in the alumni, or where are you?
Harkins Hall, 412.
Got it. Okay.
We don't hold it against him that he went to Alabama for undergrad.
He went to Alabama. He's not a PC grad?
Not a PC. His wife is. But
I married into the family.
Oh, you married into it.
And I got a future class of 2039 and 42.
Oh gosh, I just think of the tuitions.
So before we get into the meat of tonight, I do have to advertise. We are starting up after January. We had a really great career night focused on government work and nonprofit work. We had a lot of students come. We had a lot of alumni come. I think turnout was around 50 or something like that. So it was a really well attended event. And that was the first in a series of career nights that we have scheduled. Our next one is in 2 weeks from tonight on the 28th. It'll be focused on regulatory affairs and government affairs. It'll be the same kind of breakdown that we had. There'll be 2 rooms you can bounce around between each of them. We have a great panel, with 2 great panels technically. So it's gonna be a really great night. Registration is now open if you'd like to attend. The registration link was included in the email for this event. So it was hidden down there in the second line. But we'll start advertising that soon. And then after that, we're hoping to have 1 or 2 more as we enter May and June. The one we hope to have in the beginning of May is one on communication and healthcare. So like health policy, healthcare, and communication marketing, things like that. So if you are interested in that and you want to serve on a panel, reach out to me, or if you know anybody else, or if you want to attend, we'll start advertising that once we have that set up. So before we do that though, we are here tonight for what is a special one night only real estate night featuring 2 of our favorite alum, Carol Coons and Sally Corkin. They are real estate agents in the DC area. I believe they're both licensed in Maryland, and Sally is licensed in DC.
Yep.
And I kind of figured, like, selfishly, I am looking to buy something, and one of these 2 happens to be my real estate agent. And who could that be? And I thought, this is a complicated area to buy real estate in. The market kind of fluctuates differently than other cities, and buying something can be really daunting, really intimidating. It's a big life step. So I thought, I was pretty ignorant about it until I taught myself a lot of things. But I figured, we have these resources as part of our club, and why not create something like this so that everyone can get a little more educated about something that's such a big deal. So Sally and Carol will be presenting for the next 30 to 40 minutes, and we will have some time for Q&A afterward. If you have questions in the middle of the presentation, I'd encourage you to put them in the in the chat box. And I will interject as the questions come if I feel there's a good break. Otherwise, if you like saving your questions to the end, feel free to do that. And I'm sure we're all willing to stick around after 8 o'clock if there's a lot of great questions. So unless there's any questions for you guys right now, I will turn this over to Carol and Sally.
Okay.
All right, so
It
it's
should be
warming up.
coming up.
Here we go.
I have an older computer, so it's coming up. There we are.
All right. All right. Well, first of all, JR, Sally and I would both like to thank you for inviting us to do real estate night. We've had some fun preparing prior to this. Sally and I hadn't met, so we've had some fun preparing this real estate night together. And to get started, we just want to tell a little bit about ourselves so you know who you're hearing from this evening. I graduated in the class of 86, met my husband, Steve Coons, a class of 85. We had 3 children, college, they're all college educated, but our oldest went to PC, she was 2012. And her husband is 2011. And I'm excited tonight because I'm actually live from PC, from Providence. I'm sitting about a mile from PC right now. What I say, my happy place. And I'm here watching my granddaughter this week. When I was at PC, I was on the first varsity soccer team, women's soccer, and I was also an RA. Both Steve and I were RAs. We loved our experience at PC. I have lived in Montgomery County for 33 years. And I currently am licensed and working at Wakerd in Germantown, Maryland. And now I'd like to introduce Sally so that she can tell us a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Carol. Hi, everybody. So my name is Sally Corkin. My maiden name's Hannon. I graduated in the class of 1990 from PC. My freshman year at PC was a year that the Friars went to the Final Four. So it was kind of like amazing. Billy Donovan, I forget who else was on that basketball team, but the quad was toilet papered and it was incredible. So that was my era. We were talking a little before everybody came on about how the campus has changed since Carol and I were there many, many years ago. And my junior year was the first year they had those, they were called the apartments at that time, apartment A, B, and C. They weren't named. I think they have names now. And one year, I have 7 children, 3 are college age, 1 is going to college next year, and then everybody else is coming along. So, but one year I was up visiting my parents in Boston and I stopped by PC with my kids. And I said, let's go see this apartment A. I lived here my senior year. And the door was open. So we went in and I said, let's just go up to the 4th floor. And the door was open and I went in and the paint was the same and the furniture was the same furniture. So my kids got to kind of live a little bit of my senior year. I got to show them where my digs, but that was fun. But my only thing is they took away the grotto, which I didn't like, but I do like the chapel now. So anyway, and I'm licensed with Keller Williams in Bethesda, and I'm licensed in Maryland and in DC. That's it.
Okay, so moving on to our next slide. So for those of you that are thinking about Virginia, one thing that I want to say is when we talk about the real estate market this evening, we're really talking about Maryland, DC, and Virginia. We in the area and across the country in some places, we are experiencing crazy historic low inventory. It is absolutely a wonderful time to be a seller. And it is a very challenging time to be a buyer. Prior to COVID, we were at an all-time, we were still experiencing low inventory. Last spring, we kind of went into a little bit of a pause when COVID hit. And then in June and July, things kind of picked up a little bit. But basically what we are experiencing right now is a pent-up buyer demand. There just is not enough homes for the demand. Of course, buyers, when they can find a property, they are still enjoying the low interest rates. We're looking at historic low interest rates of 50 years, which means we have more. The good part is you have more buying power. Since COVID, we're finding that buyers are kind of looking for more space. They've been inside much longer in 2020 and they're looking at their space. They're also looking at different types of space. Some people are going to be continuing to work from home. So buyers are looking for different things than they were in 2019 before COVID hit. Buyers do need to have more cash, or tend to need more cash, and we'll be going into why they need more cash as we talk more about what's going on in the buying process. Rental prices in the area, in some cases, are higher than mortgage payments. So it is a benefit to buying. As you can see, looking at a 30-year mortgage rate since 1972. In 1987, when Steve and I bought our first townhouse in Germantown, our mortgage rate was 10.9%. But we bought a townhouse that was $92,000. That current townhouse is now is selling for over $300,000. So prior to 2020 and around in 2019, we were starting to hear that interest rates were going to start scooting up, and we were starting to hear maybe going to 5%. We're still holding low around, it hovers, depending on the market, it hovers. For example, depending on what happens in the news, the vaccines could have a factor on interest rates. So we even have heard from the National Area Association of Realtors that they really suspect that, and this is kind of the first time we've heard this, that interest rates could stay low until even 2023. But the thing is about the market right now is Sally and I could speak to what's happening in the market today. Come June and July, it could be a whole different story, as you know. So in this market, I can't stress the importance of buyer representation. Why you need and want a realtor representing you in a home purchase. I often find that buyers will wait for a while before they find their realtor. I'm going to spend and just go over this slide a little bit about understanding representation in a real estate transaction. There are different types of agents. The first being the buyer agent. You have a buyer agent when you and the realtor have a written buyer agreement in place. So you may think you're working with a real estate agent, but if there's no written agreement, you really don't have a buyer representation going on. The seller's agent represents the seller, of course. Now, in the state of Maryland and in DC and Virginia, an agent cannot represent both sides of a transaction. But you can have what's called dual agents. And a dual agent is when a buyer agent and a seller's agent work for the same real estate company or broker. And that's where you would have a dual agency situation. There's also agents there could be an agent called a sub-agent. Both Sally and I were talking, and we've really very rarely hear about a sub-agent. What a sub-agent is, for example, in a real estate transaction, if Sally works for a different broker than I do, and she was with a client, but she was representing the seller and not the buyer. So they can assist the buyer, but their loyalty is to a seller. Very rarely do we see it, but we just wanted to bring that to your attention. One thing I wanted to note is a lot of time buyers won't have a real estate agent, and thanks to technology, believe it or not, about 95% of the buyers find their homes or find their home on the internet. And a lot of buyers get a lot of information, and they'll go to open houses. And if you go to an open house, the agent that's in the open house represents the seller. So we want to caution you in that to be careful, because you could walk into that open house unrepresented and share a lot of information with that agent, and that agent is representing the seller. So sometimes you don't realize that you could share information that could hurt you when it came down to negotiating an offer on the property. When it comes to new homes, an agent, a realtor, can represent you in a new home sale. If you walk into a model home, the agent in that model home is representing the builder. So we encourage you, before you visit a new build or a new home, you reach out to a realtor and bring them along to represent you in the transaction. Now, here's another thing when we talk about buyer agents. To have a buyer agent represent you, you don't pay the commission for that buyer agent. It's the seller who's paying for that commission. So why not have representation and have somebody on your side watching, because they're knowledgeable and can help you with that real estate transaction. They know how to negotiate. When it comes to the new builds, there's often the realtors can help you with negotiating, different, and help you as with that transaction.
Yeah, Carol, can I just say one thing? Because the trend down here now is I've heard some agents, so sometimes the buyers do have to pay the commission. So it would be important for you, when you sign an agreement with a realtor, to just go over the commission, because because it's such a seller's market,
Right.
some sellers are signing agreements with their realtor that they're not going to pay the commission that the buyer has to pay it. So just so you guys are aware of that, if you enter into an agreement with somebody, they should be upfront about that, but just so you know.
Absolutely. The buyer agreements state exactly what you're responsible for, and there's a certain percentage. And if you go to a property that might be a different situation, you might be obligated. So that's a great point, Sally, to bring up.
Just so if they know.
But it's always truly spelled out.
Right.
So Sally's going to work through going through. Someone have a question?
Yeah, there's 2 questions in the chat. I'll just read aloud.
Oh, sure.
One clarifying question: a buyer may find a house online, such as Redfin or Zillow, but you still recommend having an agent to assist the buying process. In other words, you can't do it all online, even though buyers
Sure.
can potentially find properties on their own.
So all I'd like to say is that I represent, and Sally represents, a broker. There are different brokers and different models out there in terms of buying. One of the things to think about is some models have it where you might deal with different people along the way in their transaction. For example, somebody might show you a property and then somebody writes the contract. These are kind of questions because it's kind of misleading on some of the advertisement that you see. And these are some of the questions that is good to ask a realtor. You want someone that's going to work with you from the beginning to the end of the transaction, or I would imagine that would be a better, because they know your situation. So that's a great question.
Second question is, what kinds of information should we refrain from sharing at open houses?
You should not. I know that I've run several open houses, and people will come in and they're like, well, how much do you think the house is going to sell for? Because I can go up to,
Right.
750, but I don't want to pay more than 700. And so
Right.
if I'm holding it open for another realtor in my brokerage, or they're giving me the information that I could share with the person selling the house, or things like that, and timelines. Just, I would not give any information like, I need to get into the house by next week, or I really don't need.
Right.
Because you don't want to give anybody any negotiations on your end that could help you. So always, that's why I think it's really important to have a realtor representing you who communicates with the other realtor. You both parties have kind of that buffer so that when you have your realtor, it has to be a really trusting relationship. It has to be, you have to be upfront with your realtor and tell them like, look, we can go up to 750, but we don't really want to if we don't have to. Of course, no one wants to do that, but, and we could move in a month, but we could wait 3 months because that's going to help us negotiate on your behalf, what, with the other realtors. And that's what we do. We negotiate for you. We're that buffer for you. And handle all of that professionally with the other realtor. So I would just not share anything besides your name. And if you're working with a realtor, when you go to an open house, just give your realtor's name and they'll be bothered, not you.
That's right.
After the fact.
Great. Sally's going to go into the buying process.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
buying process has many steps, and I'm gonna this next slide, I hope you guys can see it. This is a flow chart that I like to use to give to people, and I can share this with you guys after. If anyone wants, send me an email and I'll send you a copy of this, kind of just a schematic that shows the process of what happens in the real estate buying process. And similarly, as a seller, it would be almost the same thing. Choose a great realtor that you trust, know, like, and trust, right, Carol? That's what we always say, right?
Absolutely.
Then go through the pre-approval process with the lender. It's important to get a lender that is working for a company that is, a company that you're going to be able to, or as a realtor, I'm going to be able to contact them on the weekends, after hours. Many things in the real estate world, like there's no such thing as 9 to 5. Contracts are signed at 11 o'clock at night. So sometimes we need lenders to send us a pre-approval letter late. If you're confused or you want to know the name of a good lender, Carol and I could give you our lists that we have. I'm happy to share my good lenders. And the pre-approval process is pretty quick. You can do it online. It's like, they'll get back to you. As long as you give them the information up front, the lenders can let you know basically your budget, what you can afford. And you can go after that in one or two ways. You can tell a lender, I don't want to spend more than, $500,000, or I don't want to spend more than $2,000 a month. And they'll figure out with them what your budget would be for housing, for a house or a condo, whatever you want to buy. So then the fun starts. Once you have that budget in mind, you can start looking at houses. A realtor will put you up on a MLS search. So the MLS is the multiple listing service, and that's the most up-to-date information of properties that are listed by other realtors. That will have all the information about the houses, that will have many times disclosures that will tell you, yeah, the roof has been replaced, the new appliances, the furnace is this old, if it's all in there, or if something's wrong, conversely, with the house and it may need some help, or some fixing or something later on. So the MLS, the multiple listing service, is a great place that realtors have access to, and we set them up on searches, and you can look through those and see the properties that you like. Contact your realtor, and then you go and you view the properties. If you see something you like, my advice is don't wait. Don't say, oh, well, maybe next week, because properties don't stay on the market very long at all. In Maryland and DC is extremely hot. So again, this is where a realtor is very important, to write an offer that protects you at all terms in the contract. And also realtors will contact the other realtor, the selling realtor, and they'll ask, well, what the motivation is for the seller. On the other side, the sellers might already have started a job in another state. They left their family here, they're there. The wife wants to get to the husband wants to get to the wife, and they need to sell this house fast. And if you're in the position to close quickly, you might win out over a higher asking price. So again, this is an important point, to have a realtor who can get that information or ask that information of the seller, the other realtor on the other side. This is your buffer. This is where the negotiations can begin. So you write the offer to purchase, you write whether you're taking a loan, and then when you're writing the offer, you're going to have to consider a lot of contingencies. So the contingencies can be closing date. How long can you close? If sometimes sellers in today's market need a rent back, because then they need to go find something. They sell their house and then where am I going to go? So they need a rent back. You might want an inspection on your property that you're buying. Prior to this, we always said everybody get an inspection, no questions asked. Now I advise clients, if we can, to get in and get a pre-inspection. So even before you make the offer, you already have the house inspected that you want, and then going in. So you can write a clean contract, no contingencies of inspection. There's also the appraisal contingency. So the lender is going to give you money, and in order for them to give you money, they are going to appraise the value of the house. Generally, it's done. It's based on the market value of other houses in the neighborhood around it. But Carol and I were talking about this too, that sometimes the appraisal values are not up to speed to where we currently are. So you might see houses go for $50,000, $60,000 over asking price, but the appraiser still has kind of the lower numbers, or because that has to catch up. So people are waiving their appraisal. They're saying we'll pay $50,000 over, but if the appraisal doesn't come in that high, then buyers have to make up that difference with cash, which is why Carol was talking about needing cash, or they have to just get out of the contract if they can. So if you don't have an appraisal contingency written in your contract, there's a deposit that people put down with the contract. You could lose that deposit. You're risking that money. And that sometimes that can be 3% of the cost of the house. So if it's a $500,000 house, it's $15,000. I mean, you could potentially lose. It doesn't have to be. Talk to your realtor about what makes sense for you to put down for the deposit. But just so you're aware of making sure that your realtor works in your best interest. That's what the buyer agreement says, that we're your fiduciary, that we do the best for you with you in mind. And we want to protect you at all costs. With the other side. Of course, we work with the other side. We want the contract, the transaction to be smooth and happen, because that's what our clients want. But we want to protect you at all costs. And so once the contingencies are removed, that's usually by date. You have 7 days to get the inspection done. You have 14 days to get the appraisal done. You have 21 days to get all your financing in. You remove all of those contingencies and you speak with your lender. You get the final number of the money that you need to bring for closing. You close the property, you take possession, and you go home and move. It's a great day. So just these slides follow up on that. So the lender will get you a pre-approved and not pre-authorized. And that's an important point too. There's some lenders are like, yeah, we'll get you your letter. And people just call up and say, yeah, I make $200,000, give me a loan. Okay, great. But then when you go to submit your offer, the realtor on the other side, the seller's realtor, is going to ask that lender hard questions. Well, how do you know this person? Did they give you any information? No, they just told me on the phone. So there's a difference between pre-approved and pre-authorized. So just so you are aware of that, that also most sellers, and in today's market, again, you have to have a pre-approval. That means the lender's like, yep, we're ready to close, no problems. We already have vetted this person completely. There are different type of loans. There are conventional loans, there are FHA loans, there are VA loans, and then often sometimes people have gifts they're going to receive from parents or grandparents or whoever that are going to give them money for closing. And it's important for the lender to know that you'll have that gift money. So they'll ask for your W-2s, they'll ask for your tax records, they'll ask for your government ID. So all that normal stuff that we have to give. And then your realtor and your lender should be in good contact. They should be able to contact each other freely to get what they need for you to close. So this again is just another slide we went over, looking for the homes and making the offer and negotiating the contract to the best result for our clients. So these are again, the contingencies, the inspections, the appraisals, the financing. So these are all the contingencies that we go through. We talked about the cash above appraised value. So how important it is to think about that. Think about the appraised value. Talk to your realtor again, who will do a CMA, which is called a comparative market analysis of the home that you want to buy. And they'll tell you, yeah, it makes sense for you to offer this much for this house. It is worth this much compared to the other houses that we're seeing. And whether you should waive that appraisal and whether it will come through. So then let's just talk about the cost that a buyer has. So overall, the closing cost at the end that you need to bring to the table, it's about 3% of that sale price. Just so you know, between the taxes and recordation taxes and what you're going to owe for your down payment, it's about 3%. When you order an inspection, that also is paid for by the buyer, depending on the size of the house. If it's a large house, it could be $700. If it's a condo, it's of course much less. Radon testing is required in Montgomery County. It is not required that the buyer does it, although it is a contingency you can put in. So if you decide to have a radon test and a contingency, then you pay for it. Otherwise, before closing, the seller has to have that radon test, and it costs about $150. So again, the appraisals, they're ordered by the lenders, but that is something that the buyer pays for. And a home warranty, you could choose to invest in. It is a good thing, especially if you're waiving some inspections. It's great to buy that home warranty. It's about $100. You can get deductibles, and it's maybe $600 for the year, but it covers all the appliances and other things that would be very helpful. Again, if you're going into a scenario where you're making an offer without inspections or other contingencies. So is this what you wanted to take over, Carol? You're on mute.
Oh, okay, I'm back. Okay. So in this market, what we're experiencing is properties going and having multiple offers. So basically, I'll give you an example. I had a property that was on the market. I had 68 people, 68 agents through the house in 3 days. So if you multiply 68 times 2 or 3, think about the number of people that went through that house. I had 7 offers, multiple offers, and I had escalating clauses, and it escalated for $30,000 over the asking price. In today's market, we have to think about the list price really as being the starting point. Sellers are pricing their houses that are priced at a good starting point are going to receive multiple offers. In Maryland, I don't know if you heard that there was a house that was priced really, really low, 88 offers.
Mm-hmm.
When I spoke to a realtor friend of mine, he said, he kind of did the seller a disservice by pricing it so low that it generated 88 offers. Mm-hmm. As realtors, we're required to present all 88. We've got to disclose that and present it. So that's a good and a bad problem for a listing agent. So like I said, houses that are priced or below market, they're going to sell 2 to 5 days. And when we say you have to be prepared to act quickly, In this market, when you're thinking about hiring a buyer agent or having a buyer agent, you have to kind of think that Sally just explained this whole process. It's so important not to be afraid to get into a buyer agreement with an agent. It doesn't mean it's a lifetime or you're totally committed. Believe it or not, you can fire your realtor and the realtor can fire you. What's not good is for you to walk into an open house, fall in love with the house, and not have somebody who can write up a contract and represent you in the sale. In the sale, if you are now starting your, oh my God, I've got to find a realtor, you can make a big mistake. You want to look for a realtor that's going to be able to have good negotiating skills. They're representing you in the transaction. For example, Sally and I, we work for two different brokers. I'd love to be on the other side of any transaction with Sally. And really, in the real estate world, when listing agents get offers, they look at the offer and they could tell right away whether they're working with an experienced, just by how the contract comes in. A contract could be 57 pages. Mm-hmm. It's huge. So it's important that the realtor has good relationships with other realtors. We also look, like, as Sally was saying, we look at the lender letters. It's really important that you have a good, strong lender letter. I've had some buyers who would like to work with credit unions because the rates are low. The credit unions work 9 to 5. Like Sally said, we're working on possibly seeing a house on a Saturday. We need to be able to call our lender and say, hey, we just saw 123 Main Street. My buyer wants to put an offer in it. Can you run the numbers? We want to put a contract in. So we can't wait till Monday morning. If we wait till Monday morning, we could totally have missed out on it.
Right.
So,
can I just add on what
Sure.
you were saying, Carol, with
Absolutely.
the contract? So yeah, if you see a house on a Saturday, and many listing agents in today's market, I know we keep saying that, but it really is a really strict, they'll say offers due Monday, Tuesday. Contracts need to be written, and they need to be written completely. I've listed houses where I've gotten contracts from people. I was selling a house in Bethesda, and some agent was from Virginia. I'm nothing against Virginia, but he sent me a contract that it did not even have all the addendum. It didn't have everything with it. And I had to send it back to him. And I said, I'm not presenting this to my client because it's not complete. And he said, well, you just write up the forms for me. Which we can't do. We can't write the other side. So he did not do his clients justice because he didn't look into everything that was needed for that contract, and even realtors in Maryland or wherever. So it is important to have a realtor who like and trust, who is going to be complete, who's going to make sure that when you want to buy a house, they're going to make sure that contract is absolutely complete and clean, so it doesn't get turned back, because that few hours or day is going to cause you, is going to possibly lose you the deal. Is there a question, JR?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
A question I was going to ask too, actually. So thanks for asking, Molly. Could you expand on the sub point of your second line there? If you are getting financing, you are protected by an appraisal.
Okay. So the lender is not going to give you more than what the house is appraised for, but it is very important. And so it is important that you have an appraisal contingency in the contract.
Yeah.
So the appraisal contingency protects you, because if you buy a property and you put an offer in for 300 and it doesn't appraise it appraises for 280. When you have an appraisal contingency, the buyer goes back and gives a notice to the seller and says, the house did not appraise. We need for you to drop the price to 280.
Mhm.
So essentially, if you didn't have that contingency, you would have no negotiation on that. And if it didn't appraise, you're not going to get a loan for 300,000 if it didn't appraise. If you don't have an appraisal contingency, you would have to come up with $20,000 to do that.
Right.
So if you're getting financing, you may still have more money in the bank to make up the difference, but it's very dangerous with appraisal contingencies, without appraisal contingencies, because you could also have some lender repairs that are required. And if there's nothing, so in other words, when the appraiser goes out and they see that there's a repair that needs to be done on the property, if you don't have an appraisal contingency in place, you're responsible for that repair. I hope that helps. Does that help answer the question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
I think we're moving on to the next slide.
Okay.
So we've talked about multiple offer situation. That's why it's important to have an agent. Sellers, basically, when you make your offer, you don't get a second chance off. So you want to be able to make your best offer that you possibly can give. You also want to give a large deposit, and we call that an earnest money deposit. This costs the buyer essentially nothing, because that money is essentially going to go towards the sale of the
Closing costs.
property.
Mhm.
And it gives the seller, we're not seeing earnest money deposits of 1% anymore. We're seeing earnest money deposits of 5% or more.
Mhm.
It just shows the seller that you're committed, because that large deposit, if you don't hold to the contract, you could lose that earnest money deposit. So as Sally mentioned, the agent, as a buyer agent, we would reach out to the listing agent and find out exactly what the sellers need. In this market, often we're also seeing that some buyers are offering free rent backs. They're allowing the sellers to stay in the property at no cost for a month or two while they either find their next place or move out. When we talk about contingencies, it is absolutely crazy. And I do want to really stress it's important not to get caught up in the emotion of purchasing it in this market and give up things that you don't feel comfortable doing. And that is the home inspection. The home inspection, to buy a property with no home inspection as a buyer agent, I don't want to push my buyers, but I do mention to them, in the market that we're dealing with right now, sellers are seeing offers with no home inspections. It's very, very risky. In some cases, the buyers might be able to do a pre-inspection before they place an offer. A pre-inspection might entail just a walk and talk where you hire an inspector to come into the property with you, and they walk and talk and they look at the major systems in the property and give you an idea about the property before you make an offer. When you are able to do a walk and talk, you can put an offer in that doesn't have a home inspection. But here's the problem. The home that had 68 showings, I didn't have any room to allow someone to schedule a home inspection for an hour. So there are some sellers that will not allow pre-inspections. The other way to deal with a home inspection, prior to our low inventory, you might see a home inspection with the right to negotiate and the right to cancel. We are seeing home inspections that are basically the right to terminate. It's for information only. They're not going to negotiate. And a couple of years ago, people would go through a home, have a home inspection, and they'd send a checklist off to the seller of maybe 10 items or more that they wanted the sellers to fix in order to go forward in the contract. And if you have a home inspection contingency and you have the right to negotiate, it puts the seller in a tough situation. So when a seller gets an offer with no home inspection, it couldn't be a dream come true for a seller. For a buyer, it's very, very risky. So the other thing you could do with a home inspection is, rather than have a 7-day period to do a home inspection, you might offer to have that home inspection done within 3 days. Because remember, the seller is taking their house off the market while you do their home inspection. And then if the home inspection doesn't go the way, doesn't go well, then the seller has lost time. An escalation clause. The way the escalation clauses work is the sellers can only escalate off of the highest offer. So basically what it means is that if a house is on the market, say for $300,000, and you're willing to escalate to $350,000, you can put in an escalation clause in, but you're kind of showing your cards. You're showing that you're willing to go to 350. But you could escalate by $1,000 over the highest offer. But really, serious escalation clauses are going $5,000 over the highest asking price. So you have to use, that's another technique to winning in multiple offer situations. It's always important to do a competitive market analysis before you make an offer. However, I really have to say, in this market, if the buyers want the house bad enough, they're going 50, 60, 70. We're hearing $100,000 over asking price. So really, the comparative market analysis is much different than it was a couple of years ago when we were in a very different market.
But I think, Carol, it also kind of gives us an idea of where the appraisals would be too. Right?
Exactly.
So that might be the
And
benefit of doing it for our clients. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also too, you can escalate to the moon, but you also have to remember the sellers and the seller's agent is going to sit down and they're going to look and they're going to say, hey, $500,000 for this house that's $350,000. It's not going to appraise. So you can give a high, a high offer. The best thing is to go in strong. And because if you're sitting there with many offers, they're not going to call you back. You're just going to get the call, you got it or you didn't, or you might be the one that they're really entertaining, that they might ask you to change the terms to make it a little bit more favorable. So in multiple offer situations, the buyer agents are really getting creative now in terms of increasing the seller's net without the price, so they don't have to worry about appraisal issues. For an example, when you have a real estate transaction, the buyers and the sellers split the transfer taxes, and that being the state and the county and the recordation taxes. To make it more attractive, the buyers might be willing to pay 100%. Then the seller doesn't have to worry about the appraisal. always, always important to ask your lender to call on your behalf once your offer is submitted. And as a buyer agent, I'll make a special call to the lender too and say, we just submitted the offer. Can you make a call? So
Yep.
that's, again, having that working relationship with the lender is very critical in the multiple offer situation.
All right.
All right. This was my slide, right? Or
It
yours.
does-
I think it was yours, right?
Okay, so yeah, so after, just some other final things for buyers to know. So after you make your loan application, don't make any large purchases without consulting your mortgage advisor. There are many people who, hey, I applied for a loan and made an offer on a house, hey, and I bought a new car. And then that's gonna screw up your mortgage and possibly wipe out that loan, or you might have to do all the paperwork over. So don't make any large purchases unless you know. Try not to change jobs. We realize that's, you can't always, but you want to have consistency. You want to be able to show your pay stubs. And if you're waiting to get pay stubs to show that you have 2 months of, anyway, they want to know, especially with COVID, there were people that were just losing their job or reducing hours, mostly small business owners, and they weren't able to show a steady stream of income. So they were losing out. They had set up loans and then they lost out because they just weren't able to show that steady income. Introduce everyone involved in the decision making to the agent early. So if you are going to have your parents come and look at a house, if you are going to have Uncle Joe, who's a contractor, come look at the house, introduce that early. Tell the realtor up front, these are the people who are going to be helping me or us make the decisions to purchase a home or how much we can spend and everything like that. It's important for them to know, for the realtor to know up front, like, who are all the parties that we need to have in the decision-making process, or at least let them know what's going on. When buying a new home, builders represent the sellers. So make sure that you have your own representation in those scenarios. Like we said, at open houses, the agent who's at the open house represents the seller always. So be careful about what you say. Use the buyer agent to represent you and to protect your best interest. You can look on the internet for information for houses, all the typical ones, but the MLS is the most up-to-date information so rely on your realtor to pass that information on to you, and all the back history and everything for those properties, so you'll know. And the valuations you see online, use tax records. Yes, JR.
Question, how long is a pre-approval usually good for?
It's usually good for 90 days. Many times we work with a lender, and they can whip those letters out. They'll just change so if you can go up to $500,000, but you're making an offer of maybe 450, you want the letter to say 450, not 500. So very often I'll say to the lender, because then you're giving away how much you can go, right? So you say to the lender, hey, could you shoot me a letter for 450, not 500? They can change those. They'll put a new date on it. But yeah, generally after those 3 months, they may ask you for another upload of pay stubs, another upload of bank statements, because they want to make sure that, of course, you haven't quit your job and that you're still employed and have the money coming in.
And usually lenders like to give a pre-approval for much more than you are feeling comfortable with. So
Right.
you
Yeah.
might just start out the process, but like Sally said, when you get specific to the property, when you're going to make an offer.
Yep. So now we have quite time for questions, or do we, JR?
Yeah, well, we're at 8 o'clock, so good timing.
Wow.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to stop sharing? We can all.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Can I make another comment? So Sally and I can certainly help. We're not Virginia licensed, but we do know how to, pre-screen and talk to other agents to find new agents if you're looking for somebody in the Virginia area. And we can also refer business out to any other states. So we certainly would love for you to consider us as a resource. If you got somebody that's looking to buy in another area, I recently did this where I'm connecting my seller to Florida, to an agent in Florida.
Yep.
And I basically got the agent on the phone and I asked, all the questions that I know is important. I wanted to know, I just knew the right questions to ask. So you can consider Sally and I to be a resource for you guys.
Yeah, or for any questions going forward, anything you have,
I have a question. Have you noticed any nuances in the market depending on what kind of property you're looking to buy? Like, are houses hotter than condos versus row homes versus whatever?
Yeah, so the DC market, as you know, JR, is mostly condos, right? Like, I mean, there are detached houses, but those are like usually, millions or whatnot, way. So for a while, the condo market was not as hot, but now it is equally as hot as the detached houses that you would find in Montgomery County or PG County, Howard County, just like right outside. And so there was a time like in COVID that condos were not going for as much because I think people were away and people like if they could get out of DC, they got out of DC because, hey, I'm working from home, I can work from anywhere. But now I think people are settling into whatever their life is going to be. Some people are told that they're going to be working from home for good, so they're looking for condos or bigger condos, or and some people are just moving out to other suburbs like Howard County. Hey, I can get a bigger house. The kids are going to be home doing their homeschooling or whatever, like school online, and I'll have an office. So so the condo market is hot, the detached housing is hot, rentals are hot, everything's hot. Right, Carol? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, people get concerned that maybe you're buying too high right now. In moving forward and thinking about this, you may be buying high, but the interest rates are low. So with the interest rates being low, you're going to hit the principal, start paying down the principal a lot quicker. And remember, when you get a 30-year mortgage, you're fixing your monthly payment. Right now, if you're renting, the rents are going to continue to go up. So really the best advice is to be smart. If you find your place that you love and you know you're going to be there for a while, go for it. You're going to fix it with that low interest rate.
I mean, and historically in the DC area, the DMV, Virginia, DC, Maryland, as realtors, we're told we can't guarantee that, you're gonna, but the value of the properties has only gone up. Like it doesn't really ever go down, right? I mean, I know that it did in 2007, like people were underwater or whatever, but now the lenders are getting more smart. They can't lend money like they were lending. So the investment you make is, I know it's tough. And I do have some people say, oh, I'm just going to wait. And it is, if you wait, there is a cost to waiting. And anyway, but
here's another thing that we're starting to see is that realtors are working with buyers and they're getting a really good feel of where they're looking for. And with the interest rate being so low, we've started doing door knocking, note writing. We're trying to catch the seller before they go on the market, because that's a great way. If you can work with someone that could help you do that, it could be an advantage. It could be an advantage to the seller. They don't have to go on the market. They don't have to prepare their house. And commissions can be adjusted a little bit because they don't have to list the property with the listing agent. There's things you can do. Right now, we're looking at the market, just trying to figure out when are we going to get more inventory?
Right.
And the one thing is that if all the realtors are saying, hey, you got to have a place to go, then the sellers are afraid to sell.
Mhm.
So we're in like a really interesting time right now. And I don't know if it's because of COVID that people are just staying put for a little bit until they get vaccinated. And then we're going to start seeing some movement again. Of course,
Yeah.
when we have more supply, then the demand, then we don't have that buyer demand and the prices going up. So
Right.
it is just a very interesting time right now. If you get to the end of your lease and you're going and you could go month to month, the other thing, wouldn't you agree, Sally, is start the process early.
Yeah.
If you have 3 months till your lease is ending, you got to start a lot earlier.
Yep.
Get out there, get a feel for it. If you have to break a lease and cut your losses, but I encourage you not to wait until a couple of months until that lease is, you know, when you say, oh, I could buy a house in 2 months. You can't buy a house in 2 months. Not in this market
Yeah,
anyway.
it's about a 90-day, right? A process. So yeah, it's yeah.
And don't get your heart set on the first property either, because you might
Mhm.
be in the game for a while. On one of my listings, the agent called me and said, you know, I've been working with these buyers. I'm actually have a social work background and my buyers are really having a hard time right now. And I'm going to ask you, would an FHA loan with some closing costs, is there any possibility they would, you know, be considered? And in this market, you can't be asking for seller help for closing costs. It's not going to fly. So
Yeah.
usually what we're seeing is conventional loans are with some money down. They are more competitive than an FHA loan versus a conventional loan. And the reason being, an FHA loan is it's usually your credit score does not have to be as high on an FHA loan. So if a listing agent gets an FHA loan, they start questioning why are they going FHA and not conventional. So, and with that being said, it's important that you have those types of discussions with the lender. As realtors, Sally and I, we stay in our lane. We're not attorneys, we're not appraisers, we're not lenders, but we are, we help you with the path and who to get to with in the process.
Right.
So did we throw too much at you guys tonight? I see the faces. Any thoughts? I always like to say, what's one thing you are walking away that you didn't know? It's always helpful for when you do presentations.
Right,
What's
yeah.
what's one thing you learned that you didn't know tonight? Everyone's being shy.
Everybody knew. They already knew. They're just being nice and coming to this now.
Right.
No,
Haley?
we can all do this again. I mean, honestly, you know, as a PC alum, just call me if you have any questions. I don't care where you live or if you use me or don't use me. I just want to help you guys out if we can. I just want to be a resource. So if I can help you in any way, bounce anything off me, feel free to call me. Maybe we can give you our info, JR, and you can just email it out to everybody who attended, if that's okay. I mean,
I was
just,
thinking of sharing the PowerPoint, if that's okay.
oh, okay, yeah.
You're in
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be great. Yeah.
That's
Wonderful.
fine. And Haley, you like to talk. Where's Haley? Haley likes to talk and tell too much. Yeah, you can walk in. But you know, I do tell my buyers, if they've made an offer, go to the open house and really just let that agent know how much you really love the house. Sometimes so once you put an offer in, it is good it doesn't hurt to go into the open house, because sometimes a property will go on the market and you might be able to put an offer in before the open house that the listing agent and the sellers have decided they want to go through with the open house. Well, you show up and you make that connection, but you're very careful not to tell them too much.
Yeah.
So it's good to do that. When, again, I just really want to reiterate the importance of interviewing people, interviewing buyer agents, and making sure you have the right connection and not waiting. And you can fire people. I've been fired before and I've wanted to fire people. Actually, the person who fired me, I was happy because I was going to fire. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and that's okay. So we are a valuable resource that you shouldn't be afraid of. We can help you much earlier in the process. I think the younger generation is going to the internet and seeing a lot of things on the internet that leads them to believe that they can basically use the internet and not use that person to really help them with the process.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to use the internet and then come and then just follow up with somebody too. I think that having that info is good.
Exactly.
And we've seen a lot of houses too. Sometimes people see things on the internet and they want that house that's all perfect. But I don't know if this worked with you, Carol, but you go in with buyers and you're like, oh, but this house is great. Like it has wooden cabinets and these real hinges and everybody wants new, but so sometimes you have to trust the experience that we've seen. Like it's a good solid house. It would be a good investment. You might have to do a little bit and offer a little lower price, but no worries because it's a really good solid house. Like it would be worth the investment. So anyway.
Here's a question. What if you come across a house that you know needs a lot of work done? Like it needs a new roof or it needs a new kitchen or needs new bathrooms. How does that affect the negotiation?
Well, we go in and we have that information. And so, you have a conversation with the seller's agent and you say, hey, so the roof, it's about 20 years old, yeah. What does your seller think of that? And it's us having a conversation with the seller's agent, finding out really where they're at. And sometimes you get sellers who are like, look, we just want to get rid of the house. And then you got them, right? Then you can go under, and then you can negotiate selling help for buyers. You can negotiate all different things. So yeah, it's good to know all that. And but it's not bad to get a little bit of a fixer upper, because sometimes people, they'll redo a house, they'll redo a kitchen, they'll pick the flooring, and someone might not like what you choose. I have a lot of elderly clients from my parish where I live, and they're older, living in the house, and they say, Sally, if I were going to move, like I just don't know if I could get the house ready. But they're the type that maintain the furnace all the time. They've just changed the roof. They do have new windows, but like they have older appliances, maybe linoleum, kitchen floors, whatever. And I'd say you could either put $50,000 in and do your kitchen or whatever, or just sell it for less. It'll be a wash, or but and then and elderly people, they have to have contractors coming into their house, and they have to monitor all that, and they have to. So sometimes younger people like, heck, I'm going to redo the kitchen and do it the way I want it. So just be mindful of that. As you look at properties, I know it's exciting to see the brand new spanking things and it looks gorgeous and it's beautiful, but sometimes you can negotiate, money so that you can redo it yourself.
You do have to be careful with the houses that look like they've been flipped, because often the flippers come in and everything looks nice, but it's not to code. And so if you are looking at a property that has recently been flipped, not doing a home inspection could potentially get you into some trouble, because sometimes the inspectors get in and say, oh, I don't know who did the electrical or the plumbing, but it's not up to code.
Right.
So
I have a friend, he's a PC07 actually, who bought a condo in DuPont and redid basically the whole thing before he moved in.
Yep.
So he was living in a condo like a couple floors below, and he bought it and kept renting, and like had contractors in there after he bought it, redoing the floors in the kitchen and the bedrooms and everything, and then moved in like a month later.
Yeah. And that's great for people who are renting, or if they're month to month. You're kind of in the prime position time wise, because sometimes, like we said, price is not the only consideration for sellers. Sellers they want to know that they can rent back, or they want to know that someone can close fast because they want to go be with their family, whoever moved somewhere for a job. And yeah, JR, there's a lot of people that I have worked with, buyers who have done that. They've been renting, and they're like, before I move in and move all my stuff in,
Right.
we're gonna paint the whole house, we're gonna do the floors, whatever they were gonna do them, they did it. And then it's so much easier because the contract, you just give them a key and you don't have, you just see the finished product, but you don't have to have your stuff and move it around. And yeah, and sometimes it seems silly to pay that, like people are like, well, I don't want to pay twice. Well, you're not really. You're
Right.
when you settle on your mortgage, you have like basically you don't pay till the 2 months out, right, Carol?
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a good point. That's a good thing to do. I think.
When Lauren and James bought the house that I'm currently in, they were living on the east side of Providence. And so they had planned to do some painting. So the mother came and painted during COVID because there wasn't anything else to do. 2 weeks I spent painting, but they had the luxury that they gave themselves a month or two to be
Yep.
able to move in because it's much easier to go in and do the painting.
Yeah.
But going back to the question of the house that's kind of run down, that's where it is important to look at the comps and to make sure that you aren't overpaying for a property, because sellers will jump right on the bandwagon and figure, oh, my house is, that house down the street got 480. I should be able to get 480. But that house down the street had a new roof, a new HVAC. I mean, those are the big items to really think about. You can get a home warranty that could help you. However, you should be cautioned. You should caution yourself with home warranties, because when things break down, you got to call. You're at the mercy of the home warranty company. It's the middle of the summer, and you've got a week they can come out. You can't just call anybody. You've got to go through. So while home warranties kind of sound nice, there are things that you need to think about with home warranties. It's not going to solve all your problems for sure. And so any other questions, guys?
My mic. Oh,
there you go. Yeah, you're on.
weird. Okay.
She can talk.
I guess I'm just wondering what you both think. I'm sorry to keep you.
No, that's okay.
This is more, super general. What is it about this area that has made it so much more desirable? I had been told that like the Obamas made this area kind of hip and cool to be in over like the past now like 15 years.
Yeah.
But
well, you know what?
Oh, good.
well, I don't know if that's like necessarily true. Like, what is it that, in your opinion, or based on data, that's made this area?
I think it's always the case in DC and surrounding areas, Northern Virginia and counties just in Maryland. It's government, federal government is here.
It's stable. Military
is here and political, like as new administration. So there's constantly people buying and selling and buying and selling. There's military being moved. There's, I have an apartment I'm renting in Virginia, in Bethesda, right near NIH. And I get calls all the time from people. Hey, I'm a doctor at Walter Reed. I'm going to be stationed there because this condo you can walk to it. And they're constantly in, they're constantly shuffling and rotating in. So that's why there's always houses selling. There's always people moving in. There's rental market's really high. And I think that's why, because it's constant moving. Other cities, maybe, people move there and that's where they live. But in this area, everybody's constantly moving around.
And we are turning over with the new administration, with people coming in at this point right now.
Right. And then we have midterms, and then so everything, like there's always going to be a shakeup. So I think that's why, Haley, it's so I think it's really, so that's why I think it's inevitably a great investment, because it's always hot, it's always moving. So
cool, thank you.
Yep.
Any final questions from the audience?
Thank you all for sticking with us.
Well,
hopefully this has been helpful for you guys.
Yeah, it has been. Thank you so much for coming and doing this.
Sure.
One novelty that I'll note for the recording, I guess, since we lost half our audience here, is that we had one person register from 6 consecutive decades. We had someone from the 70s, 80s, 90s, thousands, 2010s, and there was a 2020 and a 2021 grad that registered for this. I'm not sure if they actually attended, but it was a great primer for how to buy in this area. A lot of the good fundamentals were here, and we greatly appreciate you spending all of your prep time. I know you got together a couple times to rehearse.
Yeah, it's been fun.
We assumed, yes,
and
for sure.
even for things like this, I got to bring together 2 real estate agents that didn't know each other, and
Absolutely.
you.
networking never ends. Networking never ends.
Absolutely.
Um,
And I didn't realize I was supposed to stay in Maryland. I called Lauren and said, hey, I'm doing a real estate night. I have to go to Providence.
So thank you so much for
Thank you,
for
everybody.
doing this. And with that, I guess we will close.